and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the live fireside chat where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today I am privileged and honoured to be joined by someone who I have been following for a very long time now. Her name is Claude Silver, and she is the Chief Heart Officer for VaynerMedia, and she's with us today at VaynerMedia headquarters in London. Claude has had an absolute wealth of experience within the digital agency realm. She's an expert within the field of leadership, emotional intelligence, and human beings in general. We're so thrilled to be able to speak with her today and to hopefully find out a little bit more about her personal story and actually what the role of a Chief Heart Officer entails, because it's not something that we hear many individuals called here in the UK companies that we work with. And so thrilled to have her on the show with us today. Welcome, Claude.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks so much. It feels, I know this, I'm sounding like a fangirl here, but it's so surreal to be sitting in front of you and having the opportunity to chat with you all the way from the States. You know, you're such an inspiration to many of us here in the UK and also worldwide. And, you know, of course, I know that many of our listeners and our viewers will know who you are, but it would be great just to do a little deep dive and find out about the real Claude and how you came to be where you are today.
Great. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much. And I'm touched and honored. So away we go.
So talk to me about some of the current projects. Obviously, you've been at the helm of 800 plus people, scaling the business. It's, all over social media all the time with, Gary Vaynerchuk, of course, who's an absolute powerhouse of the socials. What are some of the current projects that you're working on now? Because clearly the business is going from strength to strength, and now we're at this great HQ here in central London.
Yeah. Well, we are about 800, 900 strong right now, and what we're doing is really focusing on global expansion. And to globally expand, we need to make sure that we are in the right locations with the right leadership teams that are localized to that culture and that climate. And so that's something that's very exciting. We just opened up Singapore about three months ago. Thank you. Really excited to be there, and I'm excited to visit whenever that time comes. Working on diversity, inclusivity, and what I like to call othering is something that's very top of mind right now for me on a global level. And why is it so important? Well, because I want to create a place where people feel physically and psychologically safe to bring their best selves to work, and that there is an atmosphere and a culture where they feel like they belong and where they can connect with one another. And this is something that needs to be tended. It's not something that just happens like that. Human beings are very complex, and we all have biases and things that we're aware of and things we're not aware of. So leveling that playing field with proper education is something that is incredibly top of mind right now for me. And then on the tech space, we are going to be implementing a performance management tool, the first ever that we've had, which I'm really excited about because I feel like it means that we're growing up. And we're still in adolescence and we still have spots on our face here and clean face here. There's so much for us to do. There's so much to add on to this great body of a company that we have. So those are the two things I can say that I'm really, really keen on. One is really the people. And then one is making sure they have the tools to do their experience and further enjoy what it is that we do here.
Absolutely, and that belonging piece, like you say, is so important. And I've read a lot of your blogs and your articles and things like that, and you talk about this psychologically safe space. And of course, you've studied human psychology, emotional intelligence, all of the pieces that really make up the DNA almost of a human being. And I have to ask, because, and I'd love you to share maybe a couple of your personal stories, if that's okay, about how you came to be so fascinated in the the genetic makeup almost of the humanistic leader of today?
The space, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I love the question, and I'm happy to share. So from a very early age, I can remember being intuitive. I wouldn't have known that it was called intuition. I just knew that I could pick up on things and feel things. And I almost became a sponge in some way, shape, or form. I was always that person that my friends came to help them solve their problems or their crisis and whatnot. But more than anything, I really could feel the room. I could feel what was going on. I could observe something at a table over there in the restaurant and be able to pick up on the tensions or the joys that were going on. And I had to learn how to really protect myself from that type of energy as I grew into my 20s, because otherwise you take on an enormous amount of other people's stuff. So that was one huge lesson for me. The other one is that I didn't have a straight and narrow path, and I probably still don't have a straight and narrow path. I came from a family of wonderful, generous people and parents that were highly educated. And I've spoken a lot about being dyslexic and really having a very difficult time in school with academics and being tutored. And so I always felt off. I really did. I felt as though I wasn't smart, and that held me back and for a very long time. And it was interesting to me to then dive into why. And so a lot of psychology and spirituality took me into the why, what I was grasping for, that what if mind. I don't know if people are familiar with what if and if only. It's this idea of if only I had something, then my life would be better. And I really had to unpack that for myself, because I am who I am, and I can read and educate myself, but this is who I am. So I became really fascinated then, if I'm going through this, well, other people are going through this. And if I feel a little bit different, or that I don't quite belong in corporate America or wherever I was, then other people are going through that. And I don't want people to have to go through that type of struggle if they don't need to. And look, human beings, they're suffering, and that's part of our life, right? And it's to accept the suffering and then move through that. And so I don't want to take that away from people, but I'd like people's journeys to be easier than mine was. And that's really what I'm all about. And so I think that has opened my life up and my heart up to the emotional intelligence and what that's all about. I'm a feeler. I've had to learn to be more analytical in my life, and to be more stringent almost. And I probably have a nice balance, but I will always be much more right-brained than left-brained. And I want to provide value to people in a way that makes them feel seen and that they have a place at the table, because the table is big enough for everyone.
Oh, that's a beautiful expression. I love that. And I can feel almost the reflection in your voice when you're talking about these tough times. And there was a story actually that I read, and you said it's not a pretty story. And I thought, well, actually it's quite beautiful. And you were talking really quite eloquently about playing tennis when you were younger, and how you kind of almost had this loathed self-hatred with yourself when you came to be playing these games. You were great off the pitch, but when it came to playing the games, actually, you were like, no, you were missing the balls and things like that. And clearly that's kind of interwoven in some of these, difficult periods of your life. And I wondered, could you maybe just share a little with our listeners, first of all about that story, and also how you came out the other end, because clearly, Claude, you're a very different person to where you were back then, and these struggles have made you who you are now at the helm of one of the most well-known most well-known digital agencies in the world, frankly.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I still to this day do not like playing games in tennis. I only like hitting. And I'm highly competitive with myself, but I've never really been competitive with someone else. And I often wonder if that's because my self-esteem was so low that I didn't believe that I could get into the game. And so I threw them. I tanked. I double faulted when it was just, how many times had I practiced serving? Thousands of hours. And double faulting or hitting something into the net when I had practiced that, until my fingers bled practically, And I just gave up on myself. And in giving up on myself, I turned that inward into a type of self-hatred. I mean, it was self-sabotage. And that really took me down for quite some time in formative years in my adolescence and early 20s. What would I tell myself if I went back to that time is it's okay to be you. You don't have to win games. In fact, you don't have to be a competitive tennis player either. You can be a tennis coach. You can do other things with this gift that you have of tennis, but to go easier on myself. So that's what I would go back and tell my younger self. How I came out of it really was, I descended from in that self-sabotaging place. I decided to take my experimentation with drugs a little deeper and found a love of doing that more than a love of tennis. And so finally in my early 20s, I just looked up one day and I said, this is not who I'm supposed to be. I don't know who I'm supposed to be. I know I have potential for something, but this is not it. And that was it. And that was the day I decided to no longer do drugs. I was 22, so I'm blessed that it stopped at an early age. And I went into a period of self-exploration, which I will always be in, but it was definitely my entire 20s into my early 30s that I went really into figuring out me, figuring out what messaging I had told myself or where I had picked up on messaging to further add to this dislike of myself. And then I had to clean it up. I had to really, and I will still have to clean it up, just like most of us do, with positive messaging and looking towards, love rather than fear, those types of things. So I made a massive commitment. It was like a job to get to the bottom of what was driving me so hard to dislike myself. And that's how I came out.
Thank you for being so incredibly honest and sharing that. It's so insightful. It's almost what you're describing is actually, and I'm sure many of us have felt it and maybe not actually spoken it out loud, is that it's almost this absolute hitting the rock bottom before actually then coming back out of it into this kind of exploratory phase of what it means to actually be you and be comfortable with yourself.
Yeah. Well, I want to be able to share it because I would rather that people didn't feel so alone. And one of the greatest things about getting clean from drugs and then starting to get clean and figure myself out is that you don't do it alone. I mean, yes, you go to sleep alone, you get up alone, but we don't have to be alone to do these things. And so there's support groups, there's communities, there are ways in which you can find people to trust and be vulnerable with. And that's something that I want to offer to the world. I want to be that person that people can feel that they can let down their guard and just, we can get messy. It's okay. It won't be messy forever.
And you have that in abundance, if you don't mind me saying so, that ability to connect and allow people to share. I mean, I feel straight away because you've been so open and honest and shared, these stories of vulnerability that actually, everything is okay, to talk straight away. So I can see that you have that quality and abundance. And one of the actual favorite quotes that I wrote down here actually is about this empathy. The empathy is the secret sauce, I think you said, and actually you ought to be using that on everything.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, in order to have empathy, I believe you have to have some kind of self-awareness. Otherwise, you will, I think, end up feeling so much for another, but yet still feeling like an empty shell inside. And so the journey towards knowing yourself is a lifelong journey. And mine started really in my 20s, which allowed me to come to terms with this and start to accept this, which I have, and thus be able to be there for others. And that's, for me, the only name of the game, which is having a generous heart and a generous spirit to be helpful, So empathy is the secret sauce, and I should say self-awareness is the main meal. And then you can put the secret sauce on that.
And talk to me about the role of the Chief Heart Officer, because I'm sure we've all watched the video on YouTube when you're re-announced and you come back into VaynerMedia, which is totally awesome. Yeah. Because of course you'd been, you'd gone, you come back again. And it makes complete sense, to me, why businesses should have in the modern world that frankly is pretty stressful, have a Chief Heart Officer who is there in charge of the culture of the people. But talk to me a little bit about that role. Do we see in the future that every business might have a Chief Heart Officer?
Yeah, well, I hope every business encourages people to be themselves and people to share with others. I would love the idea of HR to be rebranded into that of heart, of mindfulness, of inspiration, of coach. And whether or not you call yourself a Chief Heart Officer or Chief Inspiration Officer or a Chief Culture Officer, or any of these things, for me it doesn't matter as long as it's true and it's authentic. And whoever is sitting in that seat can really hold space for another. That is the deal. And to be able to put yourself back and be present with another person, no matter what's going on. No matter if, they're telling you the worst story in the world and it's really terrible, or they're telling you that they want more money, or they're telling you that they just had a win on a campaign. My job is to really be Switzerland and to hold that, and then to help guide, help human beings find the roadblocks that are stopping them and help them find ways to unlock that. That's important. So being a Chief Heart Officer is, number one, the role was built to scale, Gary, which is an honor. And my job description continues to be touch each and every employee and infuse the agency with empathy. And so what that means is I meet with every single employee repetitive times, mostly on a 15-minute basis or a half an hour if I can. That's what I'm doing here in London. I take care of the learning and development and create the curriculums and either outsource or teach them myself. Today I'll teach a management training course. We work on diversity and inclusivity initiatives. We work on initiatives to scale into other geographies, and what is that going to look like, and who do we need on the ground. I do a lot of people ops and resourcing and strategic thinking in terms of where we're going. But my main role is to take care of and work for 800, 900 people and encourage them to have the best experience that they possibly can. And in order for them to do that, they need to know what it is we do and who can they talk to and where can they enrich themselves,
Mm-hmm. Wow, I mean, it sounds such a wonderful role, but also one that, it must be really kind of mentally, quite exhausting speaking to so many people. And, again, another quote that I think you said, which I loved, was that, you start, and I think it was Forbes that you said it, you start with a place where this person can do no wrong, and you seem so chilled out and relaxed when I watch your videos and kind of when I'm speaking to you. Do you ever, how do you deal with challenges? How do you ever kind of think, if there's someone who's being frustrating, because of course we all have our ups and downs of people, that you kind of send through the message and keep that patience almost?
Yeah, so the great thing about my role is that it's not sticky and sweet. The heart is not sticky and sweet. In fact, it's our strongest muscle. And so what it really means is I'm able to, I believe, give tough love, but with empathy. Have straightforward, candid conversations with care. The idea isn't to break someone down, or to contribute to their misery. If anything, I'd like to contribute to their joy and their happiness and their fulfillment. And we're humans, and so I do have to have hard conversations. That's the name of the game, and sometimes that's what you do as a leader, right? But again, in being a servant leader, it is really to serve others and to help them find their way out of whatever situation they're in or into a better situation. So, I think for me, it's really like I'm here to serve. I'm here to provide. I'm good. I'm in check. I know how to take care of myself and do self-care, and I do. And I have a little daughter now, and I take care of her and watch her grow and develop, and that's just the biggest joy in the world. But I would do this anyway if I wasn't here. It would be what I would be doing anyway and anywhere. It might just be called something different.
And I have to ask, was it a shock when, and of course I mentioned before we started the show that I'd had a chat with Dennis, when I used to work with, who told me that you were called up by the president of NASA when you came back. How on earth did that feel, and how do you find yourself in these, incredible situations?
I honestly don't know. I have chills.
I was like, how did that happen?
Remembering that, I really do. I have chills, and the opportunities I've had to speak to people in the military in America has been wild, because those people are, putting their life on the line to serve and protect our country, and it's something that I never really in my life paid close attention to be quite honest. I thought of the military as, I had a bias, and being in their presence and going to their bases, just like speaking to NASA, is an absolute honor. And these people are doing courageous things that I can certainly dream about and think about the fairy tale. But I don't know. I just feel incredibly blessed to have this role and to work as closely as I do with Gary, and to have the platform I do have to share messages of inspiration and you can do this, and we are going to have good days and bad days, and like I do too.
And you can see you guys have got such a close relationship. Is it ever challenging working with each other? What are the best, kind of the highlights, I guess, highlights or lowlights, if there has been any, working within the role that you do at VaynerMedia with Gary?
I love every minute I can work with him, because I'm learning constantly. His way of seeing things is so unique, and it is so optimistic. As an optimist, he takes it to a completely different level. And I'll just give you one example. There was a day that I did need to let someone very senior go. And he and I had both been talking about this conversation that I was going to have for a while. And it had kind of built up in terms of, oh my gosh, this might be a really difficult conversation. I had the conversation with the person. It was a challenging conversation, but it was with love and with grace. And the person ended up being very grateful for the experience that they had had at VaynerMedia. And it still was a challenging conversation. That person left, and he came into my room right after, and he said, so how did it go? And I said, it was challenging, but it ended up on a high note. And he said, so you've had a great day. And he walked out of the room. And I thought to myself, well, oh my God, the cheek of that, right? And then I thought, oh, what he means is no one's died today. Like, it's good. Everyone is okay. Everything is okay. Like, that person's going to be fine. I'm still intact. Like, it's been a great day. And that is a very different way to look at optimism, I think. So sometimes, he's my mentor, he's a brother, he's a friend, he's a boss. And, while we might not speak every day, we'll text, and I get the message, and then I can execute on what he's asking, or I'll feed him information so he's aware of what's happening on the floor. And he's such a operational CEO. I mean, he's also, he's so creative, he's so human focused. He could do any of our roles. And it's fascinating to work with a CEO like that after working with CEOs in much more corporate or holding companies who I believe had, for whatever reason, more fear. And he just doesn't.
it's just amazing what you guys have created. You know, it's this scalability with love all around it, you know, and I can't wait for the future to see more businesses that start to embrace the feelings and the emotional intelligence, because I really, you know, see that as being the future. You know, right now business is very much, you know, about brains. You know, before it was about muscle. You know, the future, I really do think, you know, that you are on the path to the future, which is putting the heart at the core focus of business, and still managing to scale and touch each and every one of the individuals within the business.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
You know, I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Me too.
And just before we kind of, you know, finish for today, I just wanted to ask, you know, are there any kind of little secrets or golden nuggets of success or wisdom that you might be able to share with any of our listeners, or even some of the unique exercises? Because I know that you're very, you know, you're a real fan of interactive exercises with the team, post-it notes, scribblings on walls, anything that any of the business leaders or aspiring leaders who are tuning in today might be able to try out with their teams back in their workplaces.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the interactivity, because I think role playing is really, really important. So when one of the things I'll do today in management training is we'll role play how to give feedback, how to give difficult feedback, but in a way that you're caring about that person. And so they'll come up with their own scenarios, and they'll get up on a makeshift stage over there, and they'll play this out for two to 3 minutes. And then we, the audience, or the other people getting trained, will talk about what went right and what could have been better. Because then you're seeing it in action, right? Because we need each other to play off of. So I am one for experiential exercises. Again, that's kind of how I've learned as a dyslexic. That's what you do. You figure out other ways around, right?
Absolutely, and I'm the same as you, by the way.
Woo!
Woohoo!
Yeah. So experiential exercises and role playing is huge. I can't say enough about listening. And there's an art to listening where they call it actively listening, where you're really just quiet and not waiting to pounce on that person. And if anything, almost asking if you might enter the conversation, if that makes sense. So asking, you know, may I give you some advice? Or are you open to some advice? Or may I share my thoughts with you? Rather than assuming that I'm some knowledgeable person, like let's just see if they're interested. Which also will give me an idea of how open they are, you know. So listening is enormously important, I think, and then replaying that over to that person so that they can hear what they said.
That's really interesting what you've said, actually. And of course, you know, listening is, you know, such a basic human thing, but actually when we interact, and because there's so much interaction, you know, whether it be on social media or, you know, with our work colleagues, time is always short. Actually, to pause and have that silence, it's almost a bit awkward sometimes, isn't it? And you think, actually, is it awkward for a second? You feel the need to fill that void, don't you? So
it's like being on a date almost. You're should I say something or should I not say something? And we're in relationships. And I think that's one of the things that's really on my mind right now is this idea of relational intelligence. You know, we're working in microcosms now where there are multi-generations in one room. Boomers and Gen Xers and millennials and soon to be Gen Z, and that is wild, right? I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, and I love the millennials because they're changing the world, but that part of me is just like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding, you know. So I got to work on my own understanding that they're coming from a completely different world. They were brought up in a very different way than I was brought up, and so this idea of relationships is something that we need to focus more on, and that's where the self-awareness comes in, and that's where the idea of generosity comes in, and patience, and you know, to make sure that I am giving you as much space and airtime as I'm giving myself, and we have a you know, equality about us.
Absolutely, and the feelings are at the heart of everything. I mean, it's like you say, well, actually, people they might not remember what was said, They might not remember where they were, but do you know what? They'll remember how the other person made them feel.
That's exactly right. Maya Angelou said it best. It is the way. And in my office, when you come to New York and you'll visit, I have that quote in 3 different places.
It's an official invite.
Yes,
Sorry, just hold us.
that's an official invite. Yes, please come. So it is all about how you made them feel and how they leave when they leave you. Did we leave them feeling better? Did we leave them feeling more positive, more potential, more can-do? Yes.
Thank you so much, Claude.
Thank you.
I was going to go into a lightning round, but you know what? We've gone through so many of the questions, and you talked about your younger self, and so I'm not going to do it today. I mean, I just, want to thank you from the absolute bottom of my heart, and from our team as well, at Dial Global, just to say thank you so much. We are just
Thank you.
Delighted.
I'm seriously honored. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Just to summarise for today, I hope you've really, really enjoyed the show as much as I have. It's been so wonderful having Claude Silver with us today. We'll make sure we put all the show notes onto the site at the end of the show, www.dialglobal.org/podcast. And you can also find us on YouTube as well, under Dial Global, which stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders Global. There's so many pearls of wisdom that I picked up today from Claude, including perhaps now going back to the office and trying out a couple of these exercises about how we might be able to deliver, perhaps these challenging situations, and how to actually, talk to people openly and honestly about them. But I think, if you have, yourself or had any difficult situations in your life, or are, even suffering, as Claude has said, from, unhappiness or self-hatred, really, reach out and make sure that you do reach out to others, because there's people out there that really want to listen. They really want to make a difference. So do not be a stranger and do not be by yourself. Please feel free to get in touch with ourselves, or of course, you will find Claude, all over the wonder that is social media. So please do stay in touch. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders Fireside Chat with Dial Global. My name is Leila Mackenzie-Dellis, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.